Hello everyone, in this video here I'll be doing a demonstration on just inspecting your vehicle for new car buyers. Now if you're going out and buying a used vehicle, just some of the tips to be aware just to see if your vehicle's been painted or if it's ever been in an accident or if there's any possible signs of rust which may be occurring. Just something to look further for down the road, just things to keep in mind. Now for inspecting any body lines here, what you want to check for is the spaces to make sure they're nice and even from the top all the way starting down to the bottom. Now this is with a hood to fender transition, but this also includes a door to fender transition or fender to bumper transition, depending on the make or model of the vehicle. They do vary between what type of body lines they have. What you want to make sure also is that if you have a roughly even space through here, you also want to make sure you go to the other side of the vehicle here and inspect the exact same space to ensure that they're pretty close to being the same. Now an easy way to do this, you can actually take a pen and insert it in the top here and just to see the space, just rough it out, and then you can go to the same and just insert the pen down at the bottom here. Now it depends on the width of the body space itself. Now you can do the same thing for bumpers. You want to make sure that the bumper is actually flush with the fender itself. Then you also want to make sure the line is roughly the same here. Now over time, what can happen also is a lot of vehicles, especially on the rear vehicles, during the wintertime any salt can get jammed up in behind or snow, and what happens is there's actually clips in behind the fender here that most bumpers do actually bolt to. Now this does depend on the vehicle's make also, and what will happen actually is it'll start to rust through, and then your bumper will actually start to sag down a little bit because the fasteners have come undone. Now moving on to the doors, this is something you also want to keep in mind. Just like between the hood and fender, you also want to make sure these spaces, the body spaces, are all the same along, or roughly the same, and including divided between all three, and also from top to bottom marks. Now for the trunk itself, also the same part. We want to make sure this body line is all the same. Continue along the bottom of the bumper itself, and also along the fender to bumper itself. Now moving on to any of the body lines, same thing, continue from the fender all the way across both doors and to the back panel. You'll have this body crease. You also want to make sure that is in line with all the panels itself. The same thing for any window trim like so here. Sometimes it can happen, they do work their way out after time, the plastic does dry out, but normally they will roughly keep in the same line. And this also includes the bottom of the door here. And if depending on your vehicle's model, you might also have door trim that continue along here too, so you also want to make sure that's somewhat in line, because that'll actually tell if possibly something has been removed. Now to check if any panels have any filler or have ever had any work done to them. Now this is similar to a dent, like a small door dent. What will happen is you'll actually have a continuation of ripples along the side of the panel itself. It's a fairly straight edge. Now on here we actually kind of have a rounded contour on the door here, and it comes back down, so it'll be normal for any distortion in an image. But along here we have actually, it's a little hard to see from the background here, but you can see there's actually a continuous straight edge that goes along, and the same goes along here. So you know that the vehicle hasn't had any work done, or if it has, someone's done a good job of it. Basically what this is, it'll just, I guess the best way to describe it is almost ripples along the water. That may be an exaggeration of it, but similar to what a door dent does. If you look at it and you look at an image, you'll see the distortion in the reflection of the image. Now moving on to the paint shine itself. Now this does vary in between vehicle manufacturers. Some do have a shinier paint job than others do, or a clearer image in the reflection. As you can see here, the image in the background is fairly crisp. What normally happens is, say a body panel is painted, what can happen here then is by a hand paint gun. Now it depends on the quality of paint gun used and depends on the skill level of whoever's doing the paint job themselves. Sometimes you can have somewhat of an orange peel effect on the paint. Now this is compared right directly to the fruit itself. What happens is kind of a dimply effect on the surface. Now some paint shops will wet sand this out, others won't, so sometimes you can tell if something has been painted and something hasn't. So it's always something good to keep in mind to see if the vehicle has ever had any work done to the body on it itself. Other things you also want to look for is there's ever a tape edge inside here. A lot of shops, what they'll do is actually run a piece of tape in the inside here and tape everything off and then paint the outside of the car. So sometimes a little edge will form right here, just a lip from where the new paint is to the old paint transition. Normally it'll be higher, or even that could happen from the clear coat itself too. So that's also something else to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind too is that other shops that don't tape it off, what will happen is you'll get somewhat of an overspray inside here. And what this will do is just create a hazy effect on the paint itself, and it'll somewhat be rough to the touch. So that's also something to keep in mind too. So another spot where to notice tape edges, sometimes along the rubbers here. What will happen is the shop will actually tape this off, and sometimes the paint can leak past the tape line itself and leak onto the rubbers. This can also be the same around the door here. Sometimes, depending on your door style, they might have little gaskets in behind, black gaskets, or gray. So what you want to check for is if it's ever been had any paint on the gasket itself. Now you also want to inspect for any paint lines that have been done around the lights itself. A lot of times if a car's been painted, they won't remove the tail lights. Other shops will, and you can usually see a little paint line inside there. Another thing I also want to make note of, if the emblem's ever been removed to have the vehicle painted, some places will remove them, other places won't. They'll just tape off around them, so you can check for any lines around the emblem itself, or sometimes the emblem won't be actually installed straight or in a different location. So you want to do a little research on your vehicle's make and model to see where the emblem is actually located, if there's any dimensions for it. And sometimes this can give you a rough idea if anything's ever been done, if the emblem's been removed. Now, this is not totally saying that the vehicle has been painted, because some people do debadge their vehicles just for aesthetic purposes and reinstall it after. But just something to keep in mind. Sometimes to tell if a vehicle's also been painted, you can also look inside the inner fenders here. Normally the inner fenders are black. I haven't had any experience with any others different colors, unless you get into trucks, which they actually have a steel inner fender in them. Just continuing on from the inside of the box, they'll normally be the same color as the vehicle itself. Other times it can be a different color. What you'll check for here is actually whatever the color of the car is. You might see the overspray inside here, or you can continue around behind the wheel. Sometimes you can peek underneath, and you'll see some of the black suspension parts. They can also be painted the same color as the vehicle itself. Now for inspecting for rust, normally what we'll want to do is check underneath all your doors here. Usually there is a rubber gasket that goes along the bottom, and what will happen, it'll just trap moisture, salt, or snow over time, and then it'll just start rusting out the bottom of the door. So it's always something good to keep in mind. Another spot to check for is your rocker panels itself. Sometimes it's good to just take a peek under the vehicle here and just look at the rockers to see if they actually are starting to rust a little bit. Now normally, because it's so close to the ground and you have your wheels, you're always continuously throwing up debris from the road, it will open up for opportunity to rust. Other vehicles with plastic caps over top of these rockers, now some of them are prone for rusting. What will happen is any of the moisture will get trapped in between there, and there's actually no way for it to escape. So what will actually happen is the rocker itself will rust out, and you won't actually notice it because you have a plastic cap over top of it. Now it's always something you want to keep in mind. Normally those caps are connected to the rockers itself, and what will happen is they will fall down over time, so it's just something to keep in mind. Now also for rust along the bottom side of the trunk itself, now this is also another spot that's known for. This is the same thing on any hatchback vehicles or vans. What will happen here is the same thing as the door, just moisture get trapped in there. A lot of times what you have here is the water drains down and it'll continue to sit along the bottom here. So what will happen then is it'll just open it up for any rusting that can occur here too. Now for rusting with regards to fenders, sometimes what will happen here is you just get a little moisture stuck in between the bumper itself and the fender itself. And I've already mentioned this earlier. What will happen is any of the tabs, depending on your vehicle's make and model, will have connections between the bumper and the fender itself, and these can rust out. What will happen is your bumper will drop down over time. Now that same goes for the back bumper itself. You also want to check to make sure the inner lip is not rusting out. Now on this Volkswagen here, they actually don't quite have an inner lip. It's more of just a straight body edge. Others will have a lip that goes inside the fender about roughly about 1 inch. So what will happen here is moisture will get trapped on top, and it'll actually start rusting the lip out, and this can rust the outside of the fender out also. So you also want to keep that in mind. This is it for my tutorial video. If you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to post them. Thank you for watching.